Hey everybody, so this is the promised brewing video. I brought Chris down here to the Hudson River. We're down here in the beautiful pavilion that his father made. And Branson is playing around with some of his friends, so if he wanders onto the shot, just enjoy it. Anyway, Chris, can you tell a bit about the brewing work you've done and stuff?
Hey, what's up?
Hey. You can see all those baskets over there. Okay, this is the brewery.
I would say, brewing for us has been more of like a COVID story maybe. So, stuck at home, what are you gonna do? Let's go brew. I would say the main hurdle to clear on our startup was startup cost, because of course it was during COVID and we were trying to keep our budget low. In terms of actually creating a beer that you're going to enjoy, there are a few basic components. So you got to start with good water. If the water tastes bad, you're not going to like the beer at the end. Then you have to obviously get grains. You're going to want some hops. You will want yeast. You're going to need a good ferment. And then you're going to need to carbonate it. And then you're going to need to do a good presentation. So water being the first component was actually a fun puzzle to solve in terms of the water chemistry. Mm-hmm. The elemental composition of the water is really important, and our water is actually very high in calcium carbonate. Okay. So it's actually a little bit different than the hardness in water. Those are different elements, but calcium...
So dumb, I don't know about these things.
Well, calcium carbonate is actually what buffers against the change in pH, and pH is important in beer. So we had to basically take our normal tap water and cut it with some reverse osmosis water.
These look like bunny pellets.
Yeah, it's hops. So after the water, then sort of the next most important component is your grains. And grains we actually grind ourselves, not by hand, but it's a sort of small grinder with a cordless drill. We are using a technique that the Australians came up with called brew in a bag. It's not the traditional water over grain. Okay. Rather, the grains are actually mashed into a kettle, and then when it's time to remove the grains, we just winch the bag right out of the kettle. Okay. So it's a very simple brew kettle, and then the bag is just a homemade bag with straps on it, so we can winch the grains right out.
Okay. There's like a little pulley system and stuff. It's really cool.
Yeah, there's a sliding track with our winch on it so that we can winch it out, slide it over, and drop it in a barrel. And also so we can move around our fermenters. Once we filled them up with beer, 20 gallons is pretty heavy to lift with two guys, so then we can winch it if we have to.
Okay, that's cool. And one thing on a side note here is the grains, when he's done boiling them, he dumps them out of the big brew bag. And then I've used some of these grains to make bread with, and it's a pretty good, wholesome, whole wheat, grainy bread. It's quite tasty. My mother-in-law especially likes it, right?
Yeah, so try and repurpose the grain afterwards a little bit. Something else we've kind of got into is harvesting our own yeast. Oh, yeah, that's right. It turns out yeast was actually our most expensive component. Okay. So by harvesting our own yeast, we do two things. We knock out our single most expensive cost, and we also manage to get a much better yeast. It gives us a better ferment, faster, and has better flavor because it's already been used in a similar style beer. We use like a safe ale yeast, and then after pitching it into the first beer, we'll scrape it out of the bottom of the fermenter. Okay. And then we do a simple rinsing process with boiled chilled water that just removes all the bacteria and everything that might ruin your yeast. And then we rinse it, and then we just put it in the cooler with a date.
Glass jars, right?
Yep, in the gallon jars.
Cool.
And then we just use an online app, which you put in your basic inputs, how much beer, what the gravity of the beer is, and you can basically estimate how much yeast you want to pitch into your next batch.
Okay, that's cool.
But there's actually a component of brewing that is really important and has very little to do with science, and I'm going to pitch that back to you. And that's the branding and the logos and the naming, which you came up with, so you're going to have to tell about that part.
So we were kind of thinking what is unique to the Mount. And so we were thinking the sunken barges down by the river. So that's why we call it the Sunken Barge Brewery. And I came down here with Branson and we took pictures of all the different, there's a bunch of different barges. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's a big sunken one there and another one, 2 more, 3 more here. But there is the inspirational sunken barge. Okay, another thing that's really cool about these barges down here is that it's a whole ecosystem. So we're not allowed to remove them. The DEC has said, don't remove them. 1 year before I moved here, Chris caught a striper in the barges. So we definitely need to leave him here in case it happens again. Anyway, so then we came up with, I'm just gonna take it off. We came up with this logo. Basically, there's like a little barge and my sister, actually I should give all the credit to this label to my sister, Jen. She came up with the logo, vectorized the image that I took of the actual barge and chose the typeface and everything. And we had some voting on it and stuff. So do we have any to try today?
Yeah, we brought down what we call our Citra Pale Ale. This beer is built around a Citra hop, so I would say a little bit grapefruity in terms of aroma, and then it's a pretty light beer. It's running like a 6.4 alcohol, and then actually this beer we've brewed 4 times.
Okay.
And
oh, wow.
each time trying to adjust our flavor a little bit. So there you are.
Wow, nice. Cha-ching! You're supposed to sip after you go cha-ching.
Do you notice how the flavor kind of dies away pretty rapidly? Mm-hmm. Okay, so that was actually a function of our sulfate to chlorine balance in the water before we even started brewing.
Oh, that's so cool.
So just by adjusting our brewing salts and our elemental profile of our water, we were able to change how the mouthfeel is when you're done with the beer.
That's pretty impressive.
So the hope is that by the time you're done with your glass, shortly thereafter you're ready for another. It's not like drinking an IPA where you're kind of left with a mouthful and something to think about.
Okay, it's really good. I love it. You're the best.
Thanks.